Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Keene. I'm the Studies and Plans Engineer for IDOT District 2. On behalf of IDOT and our design group, I want to welcome you all to our second virtual public meeting for the reconstruction of US Business Route 20 from Shaw Road to Appleton Road in Belvidere. We have multiple updates we wish to share with you today, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us. I will turn the meeting over to our design group to begin.
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to let you know that this is the second public meeting for this project. My name is Ellie Koski, and I will be facilitating today's meeting. Before we begin with the presentation, we would like to mention a few housekeeping items. We are using this meeting to collect your input and feedback. As we go through the meeting, I'm sure some of you will have questions, and this may be your first online meeting experience. For those using the Zoom app, there's a chat feature that we'll be monitoring. At the bottom of your meeting window, you can click on the button titled Chat. When you do so, a window will appear where you can type comments and/or questions. Also, to help with bandwidth and prevent background noise, everyone has been muted, and we kindly ask that you turn off your videos during the presentation. You may post your question to the chat box at any time, but we will address all the questions in the questions and answer session toward the end of the meeting. A study team member will be recording comments and questions in the chat. The team will do its best to provide answers to all questions tonight. However, if we run out of time, we will still document them for the study. Again, anyone can ask a question at any time, even after the meeting, by contacting the study team. We will provide the contact details for all forms of communication at the end of this meeting. As I stated previously, the meeting is being recorded, and the recording will be posted on the study website in case anyone has technical difficulties or needs to leave before the meeting is over. We will also post the presentation slides and the answers asked, along with our responses, to the website following the meeting as well. To start, I'd like to introduce our team of panelists for today's meeting. Representing the Illinois Department of Transportation's Northwest region is Steve Robry. Steve is the study contact and project manager of this project and several projects throughout Northwestern Illinois. Mike Keene is the studies and plans engineer. He has a design and construction background and continues to oversee the geometric development on this project and all projects within District 2. John Estrom is the land acquisitions engineer. Representing the consultant team responsible for the design of this project is Amber Petkovas. She is the consultant's project engineer on this project, responsible for planning, directing, and coordinating the study and design of this project. Bryce Beckstrom is the consultant's drainage engineer. Now that we've got the housekeeping and introductions complete, let's get started on the discussion of the project. Our goal for today's meeting, as can be seen on our agenda, will be to re-familiarize everyone with the project limits and the Illinois Department of Transportation, or as we may refer to throughout the meeting as IDOT's typical study process, summarize the need for improvement, provide the recommended improvements, including explaining what has changed since the first public meeting, explain the next steps for the project, and take some questions from the audience. Now I'm going to hand the presentation off to Amber to discuss the study.
So as we get started, for those of you that attended our first meeting, some of these initial slides may look a little familiar. I wanted to provide a brief summary of the project as we have some new attendees. And as a reminder, a recording of the first meeting is on the project team site for your listening if you'd like to hear more about what was said at that meeting. And as Ellie mentioned, we will also have a recording of this meeting on the project website within the next week. So we mentioned the study is for US Business Route 20, which is a primary connection between the city of Rockford to the west and the city of Belvidere to the east. IDOT, in collaboration with the Rockford Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, has been analyzing this corridor throughout the years to anticipate when widening the original 2-lane roadway to 4 lanes was warranted based on traffic demand. To date, US Business Route 20 from downtown Rockford to just east of Shaw Road is 4 lanes. This study focuses on one of the last 2 segments of US Business Route 20 between Rockford and Belvidere that has not been widened and is only 1 lane in each direction. As shown by this slide, the study's limits are from about a quarter mile east of Shaw Road to the State Street-Appleton Road intersection. The other segment, that is 2 to 3 lanes wide, is just east of our project and is also being currently studied by another consultant. So those were the limits of our study, but I wanted to briefly remind you of the phases of a typical IDOT project and where our study falls within this process. So IDOT projects are organized into 3 distinct phases. Phase 1 is more of a planning stage that includes preliminary engineering and environmental studies. During this phase, we study existing conditions and future travel demands, issues and concerns are identified, needs are prioritized, and the public is engaged for input and comments. Near the end of phase 1, the ultimate product is a design report that establishes a recommended alternative given all the information that we collect. This recommended alternative is further discussed and developed in phase 2 through the production of contract plans illustrating the design and details on how to build the proposed improvements. Land acquisition is also included during phase 2. Finally, phase 3 is the physical construction of the project, where you will see all the planning and design efforts come to life. As this figure shows, we are currently in phase 1. What you see on this slide are items typically included in a phase 1 study. And at the time of our first meeting, we were just introducing the project and beginning items in the first column. Since that meeting, we've continued our analyses. We've taken the comments we received to date into account and revised the geometry. We've continued coordination with the many stakeholders, and we've had further developed an alternative for the corridor that we want to update you on today. After today's meeting and comment period, we plan to review the input we received to narrow in on the final recommended alternative. This study timeline summarizes a little of where we've been and what we still have left to do. We are anticipating 1 more public meeting in phase 1 in order to present the final recommended option. But we wanted to show the revisions that we've made since the first public meeting and have another opportunity for the public to provide comments. So let's briefly summarize what needs improving. We already mentioned that our 4-mile section of roadway is one of the last areas Business 20 is with 1 lane in each direction. So widening would create a consistent corridor. But we don't widen the roadway just because the road configuration on either side of the project is 4 lanes, but also because we've analyzed the existing and projected future traffic. In the first meeting, we went over what the existing traffic numbers were for the corridor and showed that currently 3 intersections already have a level service, or LOS as we abbreviate, values that do not meet criteria. And that was for Beaver Valley Road, Town Hall Road, and Dock Wolf Drive intersections. As a reminder, we mentioned that level of service is essentially the grading scale of the level of congestion of roadway, with A being the best and F being the worst, as shown in the diagram to the lower left. And for this type of study, criteria requires a level C or above, which a majority of users would consider comfortable. This slide is showing throughout the life of the pavement, which we assume to be about 20 years, what would happen if we didn't change the roadway in any way, but we accounted for projected 2045 traffic values? As you can see, several more of the areas will be heavily congested and not meet an LOSC criteria, which is denoted by the red squares. Since the last meeting, we've received several comments from residents stating they are already experiencing impacts from traffic increases as certain movements, such as getting out of their driveways, are taking longer to accomplish than before. We continue to monitor the most recent available traffic volumes and reported crashes to assist in determining the most practical solution for the corridor. So then we ran an analysis with the same values for the projected 2045 traffic, but on a proposed 4-lane US Business Route 20 roadway. This shows almost all of the intersections meet the desired conditions through 2045, except for the intersection at Highline Street and Doc Wolf Drive, which is still showing a level of service of E and F in the afternoon. This intersection is unsignalized, and the failing movements are the combined left-through movement from Doc Wolf, which has 3 times the traffic in the PM relative to the AM, and the single northbound lane from Highline Street. The movements along Business Route 20 are above the level of service of C. A traffic signal isn't warranted here, and the intersections on either side of this intersection already have signals in close proximity. We're still analyzing what might be the best solution for this intersection, and we'll be coordinating suggested improvements with the city as the side streets are under their jurisdiction. So we know we need wider pavement, but another item is the condition of the existing pavement. Although to the eye it may appear to be in fair condition, the study area has already had several cycles of repairs. Unfortunately, you can only maintain and repair parts of the pavement so many times before it reaches the end of its lifespan and needs a complete reconstruction of the pavement. The lighting is also outdated and is proposed to be upgraded to current standards. Similarly, the drainage items such as older pipe culverts and concrete box culverts are exhibiting deterioration, and a few of the residents have reported occasional flooding in their areas. With a reconstruction project, we must also verify the roadway complies with the Complete Streets policy. This policy requires streets to be designed and maintained to enable safe and comfortable travel and access for all anticipated roadway users, regardless of their age, abilities, or mode of travel. There are sporadic segments of sidewalks or wider shoulders around on the US Business Route 20, but nothing consistent for pedestrians and bicyclists throughout the entire study area. So based on our first public meeting, here are some of the comments that we received. Some people have mentioned that they've experienced flooding in the past due to culverts or the general drainage ditches. Some people have asked, please build this, as the 2-lane portion is congested and it's well below the speed limit, even on good days. While others have said, do we really even need this? It doesn't seem like there's much traffic. And then we've had concerns about the raised median. They were concerned that they wouldn't be able to access their driveways. They also didn't like the U-turns. Some suggested perhaps different intersection types, like a roundabout. And finally, others wanted just bicycle accommodations and to connect to other paths along the system. So we took into account these comments in our analysis to set our project goals, which are, in no particular order, we want to improve the pavement condition and aging infrastructure. We want to improve the mobility of not only the local traffic, but also the region as a whole for both current and future traffic volumes. We want to add consistent pedestrian and bicycle accommodations for the whole study area and reduce potential crashes while also maintaining partial access. And then finally, we want to reduce the potential for flooding. Given these project goals, we revised some aspects of the improvements that were previously shown in our first public meeting, and we want to summarize those changes. So this image shows a rendering of the typical existing conditions on the west end of our project, a 2-lane roadway with 1 lane in each direction, separated by a double yellow line and minimal shoulders. In order to meet the study goals of improving the pavement condition and the roadway capacity, the bottom image shows a conceptual rendering of what the 4-lane roadway would look like. You notice there will be a 4-lane roadway with 2 lanes in each direction to provide a consistent roadway width with the adjacent US Business Route 20 segments. And between eastbound and westbound lanes, there would be a median of some sort. This median would either be a raised median, which has curb and gutter at the inside edges of pavement, and this provides separation between the opposing lanes. It would be a narrow raised median that incorporates a left turn lane, typically near an intersection, or it would be a corrugated mountable median. The first item that has changed is in relation to several comments we received. We've provided gaps in the median in areas other than intersections. the additional gaps were placed in practical locations to provide owners more access to the opposing side of the roadway, while still maintaining separation from opposing movements. Another change is the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. The design presented at our first meeting included a separate multi-use path on the south side of the US Business Route 20 for the study limits. To build the multi-use path, IDOT would pay 100% of the construction costs and any required land acquisition costs. However, the department needs a local entity to take over maintenance responsibility once the separated path is built. We reached out to the local agencies in the area, and the feedback received was that no one had the resources to take on this responsibility of maintaining the path. Therefore, to meet complete streets policy, the multi-use path in the rural area was converted to 8-foot paved shoulders throughout the road section. This will allow IDOT to maintain the shoulder area when it plows the adjacent roadway pavement. Currently, on the east end of the project, there is already a 5-lane section with a flush bidirectional turn lane, which our first meeting showed would be the same for the proposed condition, but with new pavement. However, without the separated bike path, in order to meet complete streets requirements and provide consistent accommodations through the corridor, we have widened the roadway slightly to include a bike lane in each direction. So that was a few of the roadway changes. Now I'm going to hand it off to Bryce to discuss the last project goal and what was changed with drainage since the first meeting.
Thanks, Amber. As Amber mentioned previously, one of the project goals is to reduce the potential for flooding and attempt to address some of the existing flooding concerns that we've been made aware of. Since the beginning of the project, we've been in contact with several of the adjacent property owners and received information via your letters or meeting comments that have informed us of locations with a history of flooding in certain areas. We've reviewed this information and are taking these comments into account as we design the drainage improvements moving forward. Major drainage improvements begin with the wider roadway, which will involve reestablishing the roadside ditches in new locations due to the widening. The intent is to maximize the natural drainage through these open roadside ditches as much as possible, but there are some areas we are finding difficult to accommodate due to existing constraints and concerns with existing properties. Therefore, we will be isolated sections with curb and gutter that will require inlets and storm sewer. We are also anticipating having to remove and replace existing pipe culverts and box culverts that are currently under the roadway with structures designed to meet current standards and accommodate the widened pavement. Next slide. Thank you. This is an example showing how close the ends of the existing box culvert are to the side of the road. As the project realigns and widens US Business Route 20, the culverts crossing under the roadway will need to be removed and replaced with a longer structure that will be designed and sized to meet current standards and design criteria. Since the last public meeting, one of the significant changes that we have incorporated is 8 dry detention basins at various locations throughout the project corridor. An example of a dry detention basin can be seen here. We have and are continuing to coordinate with several of the property owners where these proposed basins are located. The basins are required per policy to reduce water flowing to downstream properties, since the project is adding lanes and additional pavement that will generate more rainfall runoff than the current existing conditions do. Location of the proposed basins can be seen here. As you can see, each basin is located near an existing culvert that is to be removed and replaced, since these are the locations where the water generally leaves the project limits. This provides the most ideal location to capture the water from the widened roadway section and detain it before it leaves IDOT right away and flows downstream. Now I'll hand it back to Amber to continue providing project information.
All right, thanks, Bryce. So the intent of this project in the rural area is to improve the roadway capacity by widening the road to add a lane in each direction and add a shoulder for bicycle accommodations, and then add the ditch, as Bryce explained. These improvements cannot always fit within the existing roadway right-of-way, which is at variable widths throughout the corridor. So during the layout of the roadway, we tried to balance the limits of improvements between the parcels on either side of the roadway. To minimize the impacts to each side, we are currently going through the exercise of determining how much land is exactly needed and what type of acquisition that may entail. But we do have the proposed geometry on an aerial with some very preliminary land acquisition areas approximated for your viewing. In order to know what you'll be looking at, we want to familiarize you with a few terms and line styles. The existing roadway right-of-way is the line representing the boundary area that is owned by IDOT, or the state in this case, for US Business Route 20. The top upper right reddish-brown line shows what that boundary line will look like on the aerial. Now, for the proposed land acquisition on this project, we anticipate 3 different types. The first one is called proposed right-of-way, or fee simple. Proposed right-of-way is when IDOT acquires land beyond the existing right-of-way up to a white grayish line that you'll see on the screen here. In this case, all rights and interest of that portion of land would be acquired by IDOT for its use now and in the future. The second type is called a temporary easement, is shown by this tannish line on the screen that has a little bit of a hatching. For this, ownership is retained by the current property owner, but IDOT and contractors would be allowed temporary access to the property, typically for construction purposes and being able to move people and machinery around for such tasks as grading or driveway reconstruction to tie in the new roadway into existing conditions. And the third option is a permanent easement. This is signified by this white line with a little bit of a hatching. Again, for this, the ownership is retained by the current property owner, but IDOT would be allowed permanent use of the easement area to construct and maintain their facilities on that property. And this is typical for like drainage structures. I want to note that we're not anticipating any entire parcel acquisitions. What we are anticipating are more strips of parcels near the roadway in order to accommodate the widening and provide grading and space for IDOT to maintain the new grass slope or detention basin areas in the future. So now let's walk through an overview of the preliminary improvements. On previous exhibits for this project, proposed right-of-way lines were not shown as we were still developing the drainage and detention needs. This is the first time that the proposed right-of-way has been added. These are only preliminary and are subject to change as coordination with several owners is still ongoing, and we continue to develop our roadside design. So let's start on the west end with our limits. The logical termini of the study area is the point where the existing road starts to taper down from 4 lanes to 2. This is approximately 1,000 feet east of the Shaw Road intersection. Before we scroll through the corridor, we'd like to explain what a few of the colored lines represent. So you'll see yellow lines right now are representing approximate property lines. We also have that temporary easement beige line that I mentioned earlier, along with the existing right-of-way, the reddish-brown line. The pink line in this case represents the edge of shoulder, and the blue line is the edge of pavement. The raised median is outlined by the yellow-orangish lines, while the mountable corrugated median is the light green with hatching. Fluorescent green lines are drainage-related items such as pipes or box culverts. And the whitish gray dashed line represents the proposed right-of-way that you're seeing on the south side of the road. The red and tan lines shown on the south side of the road is an example of the grading for one of the new detention basins that are proposed to be added. During large rain events, these farm fields receive water from the existing culvert, and it looks like some areas are washing out part of the farmland. The proposed detention will regrade this area in order to assist with containing the water until it can either be absorbed into the ground or the water flows reduce in speed. So as we move east, you'll see peach lines, which are representative of the field entrances and driveways. These are generally in the same location as they are now. We added gaps in the median for access near these driveways, which we mentioned as a new item since the first public meeting. We tried to align the entrances on either side of the road to utilize the same gap in order to minimize the number of gaps, but still maintain partial access control. As you can see by the driveway on the north side, there will be some instances where we will need to modify the driveway's tie-in order to into the new road. On the south side is the proposed right-of-way area that is needed to accommodate the culvert extension that Bryce mentioned due to the widening and the rock treatment placed at the culvert opening to slow the water flow. As we continue east, we come upon the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area and Dog Park on the south side of the road, which is a public park land owned by the Boone County Conservation District. We will be discussing this parkland in more detail later on in the presentation, so for now, just note that temporary easement is proposed in order to regrade the roadside. Moving on, so Olson Road's intersection configuration is generally staying the same except for the additional lane in each direction and the addition of a traffic signal. There are 4 driveways just east of the Olson intersection, which makes it difficult to provide a gap in a raised median at each entrance. And the driveways are far enough apart that it doesn't make sense to combine them to utilize the same gap. So for this area, we are proposing a corrugated mountable median that will provide refuge for left-turning vehicles and access to the opposite side of the road. As we continue east, the bridge over the Beaver Creek will be reconstructed to accommodate the roadway widening and the addition of outside shoulders on both sides of the roadway. Also seen on the south side of the road is the Glen H. Green open space, which is owned by the Belvidere Park District. This is another parkland for public use that we will be discussing later. So for now, just note that there's proposed right-of-way and a temporary easement that we are anticipated needed in order to regrade the roadside, address drainage needs, and maintain drainage structures. Moving on to the next intersection, Distillery Road will remain signalized, and the intersection will account for the addition of the U.S. Business Route 20 lane in each direction. The only improvements on Distillery Road will be minor and what is needed to tie into the widened U.S. Business Route 20. Between Distillery and Beaver Valley Road, we have several more median gaps for the driveways and field entrances. We also have 2 new detention basins near the large existing culverts. In February of this year, we met with the owners of the parcels where we are proposing the basins and continued to coordinate with them in order to find the best location that serves its drainage purpose, but minimizes the impact to the owners as much as possible. At the Beaver Valley Road intersection, this will remain stop controlled. You also see we have another large culvert where we would need proposed right-of-way to accommodate the culvert extension and the rock treatment placed at the culvert opening to slow the water flow. As we continue to move east, there are several businesses whose entrances are impacted by the widening of the road. We are currently coordinating with these owners to establish alternatives to transition the new roadway to their existing facilities. As we're approaching Anderson, we're based on the latest available traffic data and the reported crash data. Anderson Drive intersection is scheduled to remain stop controlled. We have received several comments from homeowners stating traffic has increased in this area, and they would like us to reevaluate whether a signal at this intersection is justified. To date, the values are not meeting the required warrants that would justify a signal. However, we will continue to monitor the information available for this intersection. Between Anderson Drive and Town Hall Road, there has been reports of flooding in the past. We've added a detention basin to assist with that issue and the drainage of the additional lanes. Coordination for its location is ongoing. We are also planning to increase the size of the culverts in order to better handle the existing flows. As we approach Town Hall Road intersection, this has actually quite a few changes that we want to go over. So first, Town Hall Road will have a shift in the roadway alignment as it approaches the intersection with U.S. Business Route 20. Through coordination with Boone County, there is a desire to eventually extend Town Hall Road to the south within available right-of-way. This project will modify the north leg of the intersection in preparation for this future extension. We plan to use the footprint of existing Town Hall Road that will be removed to place a new detention basin for drainage needs. The intersection itself will remain stop controlled at this time. And the intersection is also where the roadway will start converting the raised median to a flush median to begin the transition into the existing urban section. And similarly, as we approach the urban section, we'll be beginning to lower the posted speed from 45 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour the same as existing. As we continue to scroll to the east, you'll see some similar items that we've mentioned before, such as the extended box culverts, additional detention basins, the continuation of the two-way left turn lane due to the many driveways in close proximity that doesn't feasibly allow for a raised median. We also have existing water main and fiber optic lines in close proximity where the right-of-way gets very close to the roadway that we will have to coordinate with the utility companies. As we approach the Van Epps Drive intersection, this will remain as signal controlled. We also will transition from a shoulder on the west leg of the intersection to curb and gutter with a bike lane and sidewalk on the right leg. New sidewalk will be placed in order to have a continuous pedestrian accommodations from here all the way to the Appleton State Street intersection. And again, we'll have the two-way left turn lane due to all of the driveways that you're seeing. As we move east to Highline Street and Doc Wolf Drive intersection, this will remain stop controlled for now. We are still investigating mitigation measures to improve the level of services of E and F and try to find ways to reduce the congestion. And then finally, as we approach the Appleton Road and State Street intersection, this will remain signal controlled and will look very similar in layout to the existing conditions. However, the pavement, lighting, signals, and sidewalk will all be upgraded. So this concludes the walkthrough of the corridor. I know I went through this fairly quickly, but the intent was just to summarize the improvements. We have placed a PDF on the project website under the Resources tab in today's meeting date that you can go through in more detail after the meeting. And we will be reminding everyone of how they can make comments or ask questions after this meeting is over. So let's go back to our presentation to finish up a few more items before we start that Q&A session. We mentioned as we went through the aerial view that there were two parkland properties, otherwise known as Section 4F, the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area and the Dog Park owned by Boone County Conservation District, and the Glen H. Green Open Space owned by Belvidere Park District. Both of these properties are to be slightly encroached upon by the roadway widenings and partial land acquisition is anticipated. There is a U.S. Department of Transportation Act that was enacted to preserve publicly owned land used for recreation and wildlife. And it is stated that the Federal Highway Administration and other U.S. DOT agencies cannot approve the use of land from publicly owned parks, recreational areas, and wildlife areas unless the following conditions apply. There is no feasible and prudent alternative to the use of the land, and the action includes all possible planning to minimize harm to the property resulting from use. Or if impacts are determined to be minor and not adverse, use of the public parkland can be approved by making a finding of de minimis impact, and the park has the opportunity, and the public has the opportunity to make comments on the intent of the use of the public parkland. What we mean by de minimis impact is that there's no adverse effect of the features, attributes, or activities in the park property for the protection under Section 4F of the Environmental Act. Since the public can make comments on the use of this parkland, we want to show what the improvements look like in both of these areas. So first we'll start with Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area. Like taking a slice of pie, this image shows what a slice of the roadway would look like at the Beaver Bluffs Conservation Area if you cut the roadway from north to south. We are looking east at US Business Route 20. The left side of the screen is the north side of the road, and the right side of the screen is the south side of the roadway where the parkland is located. This pink line in the image represents the ground as it is today. The other colored lines show the proposed pavement and ditches relative to the existing ground. You can see this yellow label showing where the current edge of roadway is located, and the green label shows the amount of widening. The new grading on the roadside will mimic the existing, but will fall just outside of the existing right-of-way line. We have been coordinating with the Boone County Conservation District on these impacts, and in this case, we anticipate needing a temporary easement to build the slope and for construction access. After the construction, the easement area would remain under Boone County's ownership. So we overlaid that proposed slice of roadway onto an existing photo to give you a better idea of the perspective. This shows that the grading would be tying close to the existing tree line. Any trees greater than 3 inches diameter that would be impacted by construction activities would be replaced at a ratio of 1:1. In attempts to minimize impacts to the parkland, we've modified the typical roadway configuration by adding curb and gutter at the edge of pavement to capture the pavement water and put it underground into pipe, which eliminates the need for a ditch in this area. We also lowered the elevation of the roadway slightly to minimize encroachment and impacts to the park as much as feasibly possible. As park activities, features, or attributes would not be adversely impacted, and measures were taken to minimize the impacts, we will be looking to get approval by making a finding of de minimis impact. The next area is the Glen H. Green Open Space area, which is owned by the Belvidere Park District. The roadway here is higher in elevation than the area we just looked at because it's right after the bridge that goes over Beaver Creek. Just like the Beaver Bluffs area, you can see the proposed roadway resembles the existing roadway in elevation and in slopes, but the proposed roadway accommodates that extra lane and shoulder in each direction. Where the proposed grading ties down to existing ground equates to about the same distance as the width of the roadway widening. Here we have been coordinating with the Belvidere Park District to acquire a strip of proposed right-of-way in order to install pipe to drain the pavement and the steep embankment. Because structures are needed for drainage in this area, IDOT will need to have future access to maintain these structures and mow the embankment, hence the need for the additional proposed right-of-way. So that was a summary of why and how much beyond the existing right-of-way the improvements are anticipated to go. So we ask if there are any comments regarding this parkland that they be provided to our study team. Speaking of, let's go over the next steps and how to provide those comments. So for the public, we are asking you to provide us with questions or comments you have about the project. There are several different ways that you can do that. Today, you can send your comments via the chat box, and shortly we will get to those through the question and answers. But after today, when you've had time to digest all of this information, the easiest way would be to visit the project study website, which I show a link to on the screen. Or you can scan the QR code in the upper left corner, which will take you to it. You may have also received a letter or postcard with the website address or QR code already for you to use. This project website was set up to summarize our project information through the project phases, allow you to send your questions and comments to a member of our study team, and it allows you to look at the information we've presented here today. You can also post comments or send project information via email to IDOT's project manager at the email shown on the screen. Or you can also mail comments or questions to IDOT's District 2 office, which has the address 819 Depot Avenue in Dixon, Illinois, 61021. Please make sure to attention it to IDOT's project manager, Stephen Robry. Comments received by June 15th will be recorded as part of the summary for this second public meeting. Any comments received after this date will be reviewed and incorporated in the final Phase 1 design report at the end of our study. As for our team's next steps, it will be to continue to work towards a final recommendation by taking into account the comments we receive after this meeting and finalizing our analysis. This will allow us to determine the amount and type of land acquisition that's needed, which we plan to summarize in one more public meeting later this year towards the end of our phase 1 study. And then further down the line in phase 2, we will begin the land acquisition process. I'm sure some of you may be curious as to what this process entails, so I wanted to summarize it here. As a reminder, the right-of-way shown today is only preliminary and is subject to change. We are currently determining how much and what type of land acquisition may be required. But once that's known, the first step, which is anticipated to be in the winter of 2023, will be to determine the parcel ownership by title commitments. And then in order to purchase property, a land survey must be performed. The second box, plat of survey, is a legal drawing that depicts a property surveyed and then certified by a licensed land surveyor. It would also show the existing roadway right-of-way on the plat. Private property shall not be taken for public use without payment of just compensation. Therefore, the third step determines what that compensation may be. IDOT will obtain an appraiser to determine the fair market value of a property. The appraiser takes into account such items as comparable sales, number of acres of agricultural land converted to highway use, and contaminated property and remediation requirements for that property. Once the appraisal is received, IDOT will determine an offer for compensation and coordinate with the property owners. As you can imagine, a project like this that's 4 miles long could take approximately 2 years to go through this whole process. So that brings us to the question and answer portion of the meeting. Our panel will try to answer any questions that you may have in the chat box. If we run out of time or if there is a question that may pertain more for another member of the study that wasn't able to make it here today, we will record it and get back to you with a response. Just to note that we also have IDOT's hydraulic engineer, Clifton Hewlett, and IDOT's environmental technical manager, Heather Rhodes, listening in if there are any drainage or environmental questions. You can also make comments. They're definitely welcome if you don't have a question. So Ellie, do we have any to start off with?
Amber, we've got a few coming in, so we'll start with a couple questions, and feel free to, as Amber mentioned, just add your questions or comments to the chat and we'll transfer those over. So starting out, when will construction start? So if Steve, you want to take this one?
Steve, are you muted?
Does someone else want to jump in to take that one?
This is Mike. I can take that one. So basically where we're at right now, we're in phase 1. You know, we have had to do some reworking of the project. So we probably have at least another year in phase 1 before we finish that. Once we have finished the phase 1 report, we will then start doing contract plans. We will also start purchasing right away at that point in time. Based on the number of parcels along this section and also the number of projects we have district-wide, we're averaging about 2 to even a little longer than 2 years to purchase right away. Once right away is purchased and plans are prepared, then we'd go to construction. So you're looking at a very minimum of 3-4 years out at this point.
Great, thank you. The next question we have is, what will the speed limit on the road be after this project is built?
I can take that one. So we're actually going to have this in 2 different segments. So the rural segment to the west will be 45 miles per hour posted. And then as you're approaching the urban section to the east, it will be 30 miles per hour posted.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question is, let's see here. Are there adjacent projects that will connect with this study? And Steve, if you want to take that, see if
This is Steve from IDAT. Can you hear me this time?
yeah, we can. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yes, with regard to the adjacent projects, we do have a project immediately to the east of this project on US Business 20, and it's from Appleton Road to the intersection of US Business 20 and US 20 in southeast Belvidere. It involves resurfacing and reconstruction and adding lanes, and it is early in the phase one preliminary engineering process. We're working on the initial studies right now and expect to go to the public at some point in the near future, as we did for our first public meeting here. We don't have a time frame for that, but yeah, stay tuned, I guess. We also plan, it's not up yet, but we plan to have a project website for that project as well.
Great, thank you. Another person asked, why are we proceeding with the raised median versus flush median, like the adjacent roadway segments?
This is Mike. We received that question quite a bit the last year. IDOT and the Rockford Area Metropolitan Organization developed this access plan along the corridor between Rockford and Belvidere in the late 90s. It was to ensure that it would be safe and have a high capacity corridor between Rockford and Belvidere. The corridor design includes the use of raised medians and then limited accesses along the corridor. So the existing roadways, side roads would be there, plus a couple of other accesses were figured as well. There are numerous examples of this type of design through Rockford. We have them on US Business Route 20 from Roxbury to Lyford right now. It works very well. You know, we have only so many entrances along there. The raised median is there to help facilitate, keep the separation, and having the limited number of entrances prevents number of crashes, points of crash locations on it. Now we have that on East State Street. The new reconstructs on West State Street that we've done recently has the same thing. 173 east of 251 to I-90 has that same design as well. In contrast, East State Street west of Alpine, we don't have that. We have a 5-lane section with the bidirectional left turn lanes. Through the years, we've heard numerous complaints about that section. You know, there is a higher crash rate up in that area. You know, you have a lot more entrances, a lot of point of conflicts. You get a lot more turning accidents. We've heard complaints from businesses. We've heard complaints from the city itself. In this particular case, we're developing this 4-lane section. We've had the opportunity to build this early on. This is our opportunity to have it continue on like we have, you know, from Mulford to Lyford, Roxbury to Lyford, versus having that situation that we have west of Alpine.
Great, thank you so much for that. Another question is, will city water be added? And if so, will we be required to connect?
I can take that one as well. Currently, we have no plans on extending water main. That would have to be discussed between the city of Belvidere and the property owners themselves. That's not our intent and wouldn't be part of our project.
Great, thanks, Mike. Another question is, will there be breaks in the median for every driveway?
So when we were looking at where to put the gaps, we tried to make access for most of the residents along the corridor. As you can imagine, that's not going to be possible to do 100%. So we tried to group those gaps and minimize how many locations. So if we had driveways that made sense to utilize the same gap, we just put one gap in there. So unfortunately, no, we don't have it for every single field entrance and driveway, but we do have for a majority of the property owners.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, let's see. And another one is, the first meeting seemed to be about whether there should be a widening. Isn't that correct? Now it sounds like a decision has been made to proceed. Is that correct?
Even in the last meeting, we were discussing how we planned on widening the 4-lane widening to a 4-lane highway. The simple fact of the matter is, for the last 20, 30 years, we've looked at filling this section of highway to connect Belvidere to the city of Rockford. With the capital program that we've had the last couple of years due to the increase in the gas tax, we finally have that funds to be able to investigate this and get this to actual construction on it. So no, this isn't, we were debating on it. We've been looking at this for quite a while on it. What we want is your input on, you know, how we proceed and make sure that we're not adversely impacting residents and the driving public more than we need to be.
Perfect, thank you. And just as a note, if there are duplicative questions, then I'll just ask one question, which will hopefully cover everyone's questions about something specific. So the next question deals with homeowners complaining about flooding. Can you talk a little bit about the number of homeowners that have complained about flooding issues?
Yeah, I can take that, Ellie. I don't know, have a specific number available to you right now. We can get back to you with that. But I mean, there have been several complaints, where it's isolated to certain areas specifically, you know, and that flooding can range from a variety of reasons, whether that being some undersized structures or, you know, flow being captured on properties that you know, don't have adequate capacity to receive the upstream flows. So we are looking at addressing those, like I mentioned earlier, and accommodating that as much as possible, so that way we can alleviate as many issues that have been brought to our attention as possible. So
Great, thank you. This person asks about the road being widened due to the casino.
But this is Mike, I can take that one. Like I noted a couple minutes ago, you know, this has been discussed, debated, looked at for many, many years. You know, that's why we had the access plan in the 90s. You know, it's been a matter of when and, you know, when we would have funds for it. Sure, the casino is an example of a development that's happening along this corridor, but the simple fact of the matter is Rockford has been growing to the east toward Belvidere for ever. You know, it's just been the case. You know, you can see, you know, everything from Alpine that grew from the 80s out to where we're at right now. It's continuing to grow to the east. So the casino is just another example of the development that will eventually be heading toward Belvidere.
Great, thank you. Got a lot of great questions coming in here. Somebody asked, how wide is the existing shoulder?
So it actually is not consistent throughout the corridor. As we mentioned, the eastern section that is urban does not have a shoulder, it's just curb and gutter. The western end of our limit, which had just reconstructed several years ago. It's actually got a 10-foot concrete shoulder, or 10 feet, the concrete pavement with a 10-foot shoulder. And then as you continue to keep moving east, that shoulder, it gets smaller and smaller. So it goes to a 4-foot, and then in some cases down to a 2-foot.
Okay, great. Thanks, Amber. This person asked why there's no signalization at Town Hall.
So that was part of our traffic analysis, and I believe the question is are we going to wait until the extension to the south? And yes, essentially that's kind of what we're waiting for, because the traffic right now, as we analyzed it, it does not justify the need for a signal at this time. However, I would anticipate that once that fourth leg is added, that it will definitely bring more traffic from the south. And so therefore we would probably reanalyze whether a signal is needed at that time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you.
And this is Mike. Just to add on that, we are keeping an eye, as Amber mentioned throughout the presentation, on growth as we're developing this. If the traffic volumes kick to the levels that warrant it, we will certainly be looking at adding signals at that point as well.
Great, thank you. Another question, is there going to be any effort to protect bike riders on the shoulder?
This is Mike again. So what we typically do when we have shoulders on a roadway such as this is we would be adding the shoulder rumbles on it. It would be an 18-inch rumble along the shoulder to help separate the bicyclist from the motoring public, and to basically make the motoring public aware that they're getting onto the shoulder.
Perfect. Another question, will consideration be given to add preemptive devices to the stoplights for emergency response at the time of construction?
I can take that as well. Typically what we do with preemptive devices for emergency vehicles is we'll work with the local fire departments to see if they want them added to it. Typically when we're putting up signals out on a project, the cost is the fire department's to put that up, but we will definitely include that in any signal plans.
Okay, sounds great. Another question, will every driveway have a left turn?
So I'll take that one. So I think this question is kind of related to, will every driveway have a gap? And since every driveway will not have a gap, the turn lanes are where the gaps are located. So in the areas where we were showing the raised corrugated median, that does not have a turn lane. But if there is a gap, that does have a turn lane. And unfortunately, like I said before, it's not going to be at every driveway.
Okay, perfect. So this particular question is addressing if there will be additional speed limit reviews between the 55 and 45 mile per hour posting.
This is Mike. This was a comment that we received quite often in the last year as well. With the curb and gutter directly adjacent to the roadway with that median, we, per policy, need to post it at 45 miles an hour. We can't keep it at 55, so that would not be possible. I know there's been concern from some of the local entities that this will cause vehicles to go onto other roadways. However, we're building a brand new facility here, 4 lanes, and it's the quickest route from Rockford to Belvidere. We do not anticipate that there will be large amounts of traffic that are going to go a different route because we have posted at 45.
Okay, great, thank you. And this person asks if we can please show the slide that depicted the detention area south of the right-of-way on the Ackerman property. So I don't know if that's possible to pull that up.
Is there a question regarding this, or?
Let's see. That is a great, that's a really good point. I'm sorry. I'm just seeing if she, Pamela, if you don't mind just putting in the chat what your specific question was with regards to the Ackerman property. Don't mind adding that now, then we can address that specific question. Okay, so she is saying that she is wondering how much area to set aside for the right of way. So I'm not sure if that's maybe a question we could talk offline about. That seems pretty specific. I'm okay waiting on that if others feel that we could do that with Pamela.
Yeah, I think we're still in coordination with the owners on these locations of these detention basins, so I can't quite give a specific number right now. So that would probably be something that we would follow up with the particular owners.
Okay, when did you say when you say east and west, where is the dividing line?
I think that's in regards to essentially what I was calling the rural section and the urban section. And so west, I would say, is more the rural section, and that would be from the project limit just west of Olson all the way to about Town Hall. And you're transitioning into the urban section from Town Hall to Van Epps as you're starting to lower in speed. And then I would say all the way to the east is your urban downtown Belvidere section.
Great, thanks for clarifying. This person has a question. They are saying that flooding has been an issue in the past in Anderson Woods with water flowing from the north side of Business 20 through Hammer Time Sports and on through the residential area. Will any improvements be made to minimize water flow impact in this area?
Yes, we are aware of this issue and have been in talks specifically with Hammer Time and a few others in this area, and are working on a solution to address that issue and minimize that impact to the Anderson Woods area.
Okay, great. Someone else asked, on the north side of US Route 20, immediately west of Van Epps, there are 4 driveways in a very short span. What can be done about this, especially the driveways that come out into the right intersection?
So this is actually, oh, go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Amber, please.
Oh, this is actually the part where we've already transitioned by this time. The transition from the raised median to the flush median is at Town Hall intersection. So by the time they get to Van Epps, we're already in the 2-way left turn lane situation. So it's going to be flush, and they would have access through that.
Excellent, thank you. And another question is, how will new entrances be handled in the rural section once this project is completed?
I can take that one. Again, we have an access control plan out here. We are going to, once this is constructed, any new entrances, we're going to want them to go off the side roads, or possibly a right-in, right-out out there. There are some additional access points in addition to the side roads that are out there right now. If someone wishes to develop and place one of those in there, they would be allowed to do that. But we are going to limit access along that corridor as this develops.
Great, thank you. Getting a few more coming in here. So Okay, this one is specific. It looks like the data from the traffic is from 2014 to 2018, and it has changed dramatically since then. I'm concerned because of the business of the restaurants as well as the Da Vinci Academy daycare and Hammer Time Sports. The casino will add additional traffic. I think it is imperative to have more traffic lights at some of these intersections. Can that be addressed?
I can address that. Again, we're going to keep an eye on the traffic volumes as they increase. This one looks like it's talking about Anderson Drive. We are getting additional counts at that location. And again, as we progress along, we will be looking at any increases in traffic to ensure that signals, if they're warranted, we'll get them out there as part of this project.
Excellent. Let's see, and I think there's a couple other questions about land expansion. I think we've sort of addressed that it's, we're not 100% sure on those specifics, but we'll reach out to those who have adjacent land to that. Another question is, who is going to maintain the raised median? Current ones break up, weeds grow, and it's a real eyesore. This is from a senator. The state cannot afford, as you know, with a history of not maintaining them. And
we intend to, at this point, do a concrete median out there. If we have a partner with the locals that would wish to maintain that median and have us put grass in there, we can certainly do that. We would need a local partner to do that.
Excellent, great, thank you. Okay, and another one is, there is an existing culvert just east of Anderson Drive that isn't showing on your slide. It discharges into Hammer Time Sports Lot. Is it being eliminated?
I can take this, Ellie. So part of the issue that we talked about earlier, addressing from one of the earlier questions, we are looking at possibly eliminating this culvert to help take that flow further east to alleviate that flow under the road at that culvert and the flow over the Hammer Time parking lot and into the Anderson area there. So.
Okay, great, thank you. Another one, with the outside curve removed and replaced with paver shoulders, would a flush medium with rumbles allow for a 55-mile-per-hour posted speed limit?
Sorry about that. No, in a nutshell, if we are going to have it as a flush, like a bidirectional or something along that lines, we still, per policy, should be posting it at 45 miles an hour. So regardless, it would be 45 miles an hour per IDOT policies.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'm not seeing any other questions at this point. So why don't we give it one more minute to see if anybody has any very last minute questions. Otherwise, we'll let everyone get back to their evenings. Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like we're getting any more. I don't see any more in the chat box. So I guess that brings us to the end of our question and answer portion. So that's pretty much the end of our meeting. I will leave the contact information on the screen as everyone have a good evening. And thanks for coming.